Hello and welcome to another Writer's Showcase, everyone. I am your host, Lord Captain Commander Dunn. I'm excited to be here today with you guys. Anyway, allow me to first bring in my guests. First off, Neph Champion.
Hello, everyone. Yes, new avatar. It's fitting, though, seeing as what I'm reading.
And we also have our long-absent friend, the High Lord of Crows. Welcome, Dr. Crow.
Hello.
Hello, Crow.
How we doing?
Doing good.
Pretty good.
Doing very good. And
let's go with this one today.
Smart.
Hello, Smoke.
Yep. And we also have our good friend, the Balerion curmudgeon. Please welcome Count Balerion.
Greetings.
Hello. And our wandering dragon streaming bard, Tarek.
我が力、我が刃、我が狂気、我が狂気をもて見解せよ。エクスはーうがけエクスプロージョン。
You say that with such resignation, Dunn. Like, oh yeah, we have the fucking degenerate too.
But
aren't you?
No, I'm not a fucking degenerate.
But come on.
I couldn't figure out what that meant at first. It took me a while to figure out what that meant. Ecosporogion.
Cool. Alrighty. So we'll just. Anybody have time constraints or other stuff?
No.
Well, there's the usual around 4-ish, about an hour-ish I go off AFK-ish.
Alrighty.
That's the only thing.
I have 30 seconds.
Alrighty. Alrighty. Gotta say hi. Hi, Becca. Hello, hi, Patia. Hello. And as Occupation Army, I think that's everybody in the chat so far. We'll just go from Neph to Dr. Crow to Count Balerion, then to Tarek, and then to me, and then we will conclude. And then I have to run.
It's been a while since I've been first.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Alrighty.
Okay, so I left off with them going to the labyrinth. So now we've reached the boss room in the labyrinth. Here we are, Diablo called, as they came to a stop in front of the huge doors. These are the doors to the boss room, as you can see. He got a few chuckles for his showmanship. Now that we are here, anyone who needs to heal should. Diablo looked at them all with serious eyes. After all, we have a healer with us. Everyone turned to Pina, who, in a fit of discomfort, hid behind Silica and waved to everyone shyly. This caused everyone to crow over how cute she was being. Kirito eyed the corner of his vision. All of his party were at full health. He looked to Klein curiously. After a moment... Wait, no. Oops. Yeah. After a moment, both he and Klein turned to the raid leader. All of us are at full health, Diablo. Good. Diablo turned to Agil, who nodded after a moment. Us too. Kibao nodded a moment later and reported the same. Then, let's get started, Diablo said, pushing at the door. It was incredibly heavy. In the shadows at the other end of the huge, windowless room, a pair of glowing red eyes opened to observe the ants as they streamed into his domain. It was a tiny group this time. He would enjoy playing with them before crushing their hopes of seeing the second floor. Ilfang the Kobold Lord smirked. They may have been able to defeat him before, but now he had the advantage. His Talwar hadn't done its job when the ants had come before, so he'd gotten rid of it. He now had Needle, great sword of dragon souls, at his side. It had cost him a pretty penny. Strange name for a Nodachi, but strange names aside, the blade was quite powerful. So, Ilfang said in a quiet rumble, you insects have finally returned to the kingdom of Einkrad. The Lord of the Kobolds took a moment to study them and the formation they used. It was exactly as it had been before in his memory. He did not recognize most of those faces, so that can only mean one thing, that there are even more ants in my kingdom than there were last time. Prepare for death! Ilfang roared as he jumped from his throne and into the midst of his castle's infestation. The room was suddenly illuminated as the lights in the ceiling turned on all at once. That opening animation was awesome, Kirithel said as Ilfang the Kobold Lord's name and HP bars appeared over the mob's head. It was, Yavel agreed from the back of the group. But we need to keep focused. Group A, start the attack. Group E, you need to keep an eye out for spawning mobs. Make sure they don't get us from behind. You got it, leader, Kirithel called back. Agil, followed closely by Kibao, dashed towards Ilfang, his two-handed battle axe at the ready. Come to me, my sentinels, Ilfang said after trading a few blows with Agil and the rest of Group A. Let us tear these cockroaches limb from limb. A cold sensation of unease went down Asna's spine. Sounds like it's our turn. Her tail lashed back and forth as she scanned the room. Come on, where are they? It didn't take long for the ruined kobold sentinels to stream into the huge room from a hidden alcove near where the stairs leading to the second floor were supposed to be. Copel dashed forward, a battle cry on his lips as he met with the first of them. Copel, switch! Silica called as she dashed forward to take advantage of the opening the older boy had created in the mob's defense. Copel dodged sideways as Silica appeared where he'd stood before. Kirithel dashed towards another mob. Asna, cover me, he called to the fox Hanyo. Asna created a pair of blue balls of foxfire in her hands. I'm on it! Kirithel caught the sentinel's mace on his anneal blade. The light shining from above caught on the polished blade, blinding the mob for several moments. Asna saw her chance and flung a handful of fire at the sentinel. Kirithel ducked out of the way. Hearing Kirada's hiss, he turned to see his Nekomata tearing out the throat of another sentinel, causing it to shatter. He panted softly as Kirada returned to his side and gave her head a pat. That was all the ads taken care of for the moment. Asuna stood on his other side with Copel and Silica behind them. Kirithel's eyes drifted to the boss, and he noticed 3 of Ilfang's HP bars were gone, leaving the last one at full health. Looks like we'll see if your information is correct soon, Asuna said quietly. Yeah, looks like, Kirithel agreed. Diavel is likely to go for the reward a player gets for getting the last attack. We'll see what happens, Asuna said. He was breathing hard. Ilfang glared down at the ants surrounding him, and a laugh rumbled in his chest. You insects have proven to be persistent, he growled, tossing his buckler and axe to one side. He smiled at the satisfying crash that sounded as his weapons hit the floor, causing the fleas to scatter and back away in what looked like it might be terror. I'm not sure how you pests managed to make it this far, Ilfang drawled, his voice low and threatening. Now you face the wrath of Needle, great sword of dragon souls, he proclaimed, pulling his Nodati. Needle, great sword of dragon souls, was a huge Nodachi, the perfect size for Ilfang. Light gleamed along the sharp edge of the blade. The whole point was to blind the ticks so he could kill them. Diavel stared up at the elegantly curved, huge Nodachi and wet his lips nervously. Well, Kirito, looks like your information was correct, he said as he started forward. Diavel had fought Katana-class blades in the beta, same as Kirito, but going up against a boss wielding a katana-class weapon was still very different from battling a regular-sized mob with one. Let's hope I can pull this off. As he passed Kirito's party, he gave the other a nod in acknowledgement, and out the corner of his eyes, Diavel saw Kirito nod back. Stand back, everyone, I've got this, he called, smiling when the rest of the raid did just that. No, he doesn't have it, the idiot, Kirito grumbled as he watched Diavel get hit again. Asuna frowned. Then we need to help him, she said, pulling herself onto Kirata's back. She gathered fire in her hands as Kirito scrambled up behind her. You have an idea? He asked. I think so, she replied, giving him a very playful grin. Kirito stared at her a moment. All right then, Kirata, let's go. Kirata roared as she ran, jumping into the air and flying towards their huge foe. If she found Ilfang's size intimidating, the Nekomata didn't show it. Once she'd judged they were close enough, Asuna hurled her large ball of glowing foxfire at Ilfang, pulling out her rapier, the light gleaming off the blade. Only a hint of her plan. A moment later, as she leapt off of Kirata's back and plunged her blade into the Cobalt Lord's chest. Ilfang faltered long enough for Diavel to get back to his feet and out of the way. That was when Agil appeared in front of Diavel, his axe-catching needle, great sword of dragon souls. Squishy DPSers should stay behind their tanks, raid leader. Diavel's face went red. Yeah, he agreed. Pina, Silica called. Diavel says HP is really pretty low. Pina was already rushing into the fray. I'm on my way, she shouted back. I'll need some cover. I'm on it, Kirito replied as Kirata turned around and dashed through the air. He reached out a hand and Pina grabbed it, allowing Kirito to pull her up onto Kirata's back. Kirata landed next to where Diavel was sitting, and Pina slid off. Pina's hands began to glow a soft blue. I've got you, Diavel-san. Just give me a few minutes and you'll be good as new, she said seriously, her eyes narrow in concentration. Thank you, Pina, Diavel said. He hadn't even realized his HP had gotten into the red. He allowed himself to relax since Kirito was there, sitting on Kirata's back, keeping an eye on the fight. The huge room had turned chaotic the moment that Diavel's boss rush had failed. And other than Diavel, everyone's HP bars were in the yellow in varying states of how full they were. Agil, Kirito called. Cover Kibao, he's about to go red. On it, Agil shouted back as he hurried to cover the player in question. Asuna, he called to the Hanyo fighting in tandem with Silica. Can you cover Agil and Kibao's retreat? Already moving, she called to him, and Kirito sighed in relief. Asuna rushed forward, Ilfang's Nodachi catching on her red cloak, revealing her long auburn hair and matching fox ears to the room. If she noticed, Asuna ignored it as she brought her hands up. Several tiny balls of her foxfire floating between her fingers. Foxfire barrage! Asuna called, throwing her hand forward and releasing the fireballs. The blue balls of fire rained down on Ilfang, allowing for everyone to retreat out of the Kobold Lord's reach. You're done, Diavel-sa, Pina's voice said, bringing Diavel and Kirito's attention back to what she'd been doing. Diavel got to his feet. Thanks, Pina, he said, giving the NPC a grin. He helped her back onto Kirara's back. Thank you, Kirito-sa, Pina chirped, hugging him from behind. Oi, Diavel-sa, if you want to finish it off, you better hurry, Asuna called. Diavel picked up his Neil blade and dashed towards Ilfang, the Kobold Lord. The boss only had a sliver of health left. One attack was all it would take to kill it. Ilfang froze as he felt a toothpick pierce his chest. He looked down to see the blue mosquito standing there. You may have won this fight, he hissed weakly, but you will never get to the Ruby Palace. Ilfang took a shallow breath. Now tell me, little gnat, what is your name? I am Diavel, raid leader, the tiny mite said in a surprisingly loud voice. Well then, raid leader. Ilfang took another weak breath. You deserve these. There were black spots taking over his vision, and Ilfang, the Kobold Lord, breathed his last. And that's the end of the chapter.
Okay, I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. Right after they were doing like this tour of the dungeon, you lost me, and the reason for that is because I immediately went to, you have all these manga right now, like My Room is a Rest Spot in a Dungeon and stuff like that, and then I thought of a great idea, an anime that's entirely based around a real estate agent selling dungeons to raid bosses. And here's my pitch. It is a manga form, but in the anime, I'm imagining she has like a Minnesota accent. Like she's going something like, "Oh, here you have the boss room. It's very nice, very lovely. Nice throne here. It's velvet silk, purple color, but we can reupholster it if you need."
Yeah, but is it close to the elemental planet fire? Because we're a bunch of fire mages, and we would like to be close to our work.
I'm so sorry. You're asking for about another like, I don't even know, like maybe another 100,000 gold.
I love this idea.
I lost you, but
I'm personally inconsolable.
Well, I
It
think
sounds like
part of
something
it might
Bracket
have
would
been that
do.
some of it was from Ilfang's perspective.
I'm personally inconsolable that the kobold died at the end.
I
That's just
kind
so
of have to
tragic.
go up to
That's just
the
so
castle,
tragic.
but
It's just,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just thought of something else. Oh yeah, we also have a great school district here. Like just down the road, you can take your children to the Mage Academy. Very lovely place. Now, if you're not into that, you can burn it down.
but the kobold was just trying to do some pest control. That's all.
But are the
I mean,
dungeons
you don't need that.
wheelchair accessible?
Wait! I have an answer for that. Oh yeah, standard zoning laws now, they are a real hassle. But every room in this place, it is now zoned for wheelchair access.
Well, that must be lovely.
Back on actual topic. Neph, you've gotten a lot better at reading your stuff out loud too.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you have. I again, the only reason why you lost me is because I started coming up with this idea.
There's just nothing you can do when stupidity takes over.
Exactly. It just runs rampant.
I have to
I
link
don't
this
think
whole
that's
thing in
stupid.
private
That's
chat.
hilarious.
No, I would definitely read that.
That sounds like something that Pratchett would Terry Pratchett would come up.
Oh, thank you. I am honored, honestly.
Write that down, Tark.
Though also like the henchman agencies and the School of Movies came up with. So what can you do?
Yeah.
Yeah, screw those people. They're terrible.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Yeah, that was just.
No.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I derailed this entire thing. That was just one that had to come out.
Yeah.
Oh no, I understand completely why that came up.
And it reminds me of something, but I'm
Tarek the manga Precious.
Oh God.
Sounds like Precious.
I gotta find some friends, pitch this to somebody because this needs to happen now.
Yeah. Alrighty,
Yeah,
Dr. Crow. Dr. Crow, I believe it is your turn.
All right, I will be reading one of my newest story that I've been working on called Yag the Goblin Queen.
Ooh.
All right. I'll be reading 2 chapters from it today because they're both fairly short. All right. Without further ado, Yag the Goblin Queen. Chapter 1. The Pit. The air was cold and crisp. Shuddering, Yag drew her rough cloak made of leaves and uncured animal hides tighter around her frail body, with her free hand gripping loosely onto her wooden spear. Guard duty was one of her least favorite chores, but she was the only one awake enough to perform the task, or the only one who would stay awake for it in any case. Eyelids heavy with sleep, she looked back at her party's small camp. No fire burned, the tribe knowing it would scare away any prey that came this way, and might alert any humans that had patrolled the road that night. The other 3 were asleep, bellies full and covered in nice warm cloth. Another cold breeze cut through her cloak, the roughly swollen matter doing little to keep the chill away. Yag turned her gaze back to a large pit in the middle of the road. Covered in loose sticks and filled with sharp branches at the bottom, it was made to kill any travelers moving across the road late at night. Some humans did so, and they often had goods the tribe could use, and their meat could feed a small number. It was the way goblins were, killing and eating those that fell into their traps to live another day. And as she was charged with staying up all night to watch the bloody thing, to wake the others if anyone fell in, and to be ready to pull up the corpses to loot the body. Another cold breeze, and she cursed the cold air. The weakest members always got the most dangerous jobs. Tightening her cloak once more, sleep slowly pushed the lids of her eyes closed, and dreams took her. She was a queen sitting on a throne made of gold and diamonds, watching servants and nobles dance in the great hall before her. Fine cut dresses and jewelries made of gemstones that sparkled like the stars. She watched as the other goblins of her tribe move about, wrapped in chains, forced to serve those that now served her. Laughing as she waved her scepter, her subjects bowed to her, the High Queen Yag. The crash of twigs snapping and the shouts of a man woke her from her pleasant dream. The pit was uncovered, sending small motes of dirt and leaves into the air. Coming to a halt before the pit, a human male in shining armor, riding atop a brown and white speckled horse, looks down the pit. The lack of light made it impossible to see his face, but Yag had a feeling the man was scowling. "Yag!" one of the companions shouted up at her. "Did we get one?" Yag threw herself into the deepest corner of her hiding spot. The knight turned to look at the shouting, pulling his sword and charging in. The yells of the other 3 goblins were cut short in a quick clatter of wood and stone on steel. The knight looked around the camp quickly, his once shining armor now covered in the blood of her fellow goblins. Nodding, the man cleaned his sword on his cape, sheathed it, and returned to the pit. Yag watched in absolute stillness, holding her knees from trembling in fear. The knight examined the pit for a few moments and then carefully lowered himself down into the pit. grunting and cursing all of the goblin kind as he did. After a few moments, he tossed the limp body of another man, this one in robes, out of the hole. The spikes have done their job. The thick pools of blood started to form underneath the corpse. The knight looked at the limp, lifeless man after crawling out, dusting his hands. He kicked the corpse and spat on it as if making sure the man was really dead. Looking back at the pit, at the former goblin camp, back down at the man, he quickly tied his quarry to his horse and galloped away. The axe slowly crawled down from her hiding spot after a few minutes more. Slipping more than once on her climb down, trying to get on her knees to stop shaking as much. She looked at the goblins that made up her party. One, Jit, had his head cut off, and when he had his hand cut off when he feebly held it up to fend off the first swing of the knight's sword. She picked it up and took a bite from the fingers. The freshly slain meat helped calm her nerves, and there was no need to let good hand meat go to waste. Jit wasn't going to need it anymore. Food in hand, Yag moved to the road, towards the pit. Cautious for more late-night travelers, she peered down the dark hole. The knight may have taken the body, but he might have left something that she could take back to the tribe. A small glimmer of gold. The small glimmer of a gold hoop was all she saw. Setting her meal down, she carefully climbed into the pit to retrieve the golden hoop. It was larger than she had thought, too large to fit on a wrist or arm, but would fit snugly on her head, and was rather plain outside the small black gem in the center portion. She turned it over her hands a few times, then slipped it on, feeding her hair over it until it sat comfortably over her long pointed ears. Satisfied that it wasn't going to fall off, she climbed back out of the pit. Gathering up the small amount of goods her party... Oh gosh, my editing is awful. Gathering up a small amount of the goods her party wasn't going to need any longer. A few shoddy bows and spears, some cloth cloaks, and other used small wheelbarrow, and the 3 dead goblins to sell. She rubbed her hands, shaking off a headache. Beginning to think. Normally she would just load all these things into wheelbarrow and force them back to the cave the tribe calls home. She took one of the cloth cloaks for herself, loading the 3 bodies into the wheelbarrow, carefully to make it balanced just right. She took the worst of the cloaks and tore it into ribbons and lashed the last of the cloaks and her old shabby one into a makeshift cover. Loading the spears in with them and loading the best of the bows in a quiver full of arrows, she set off for home. Chapter 2, The Goblin Cave. The journey home was a rough one. The path that the goblins used not being really suited for carrying a loaded down wheelbarrow, and Yag wasn't particularly strong. More than once she stopped to rest her arms and rub her temples and soothe the new headaches. Ever since she put the headband on, it felt like she was changing, beginning to notice things. She was more aware as to why she was having trouble getting the load to move, stopping every so often to clean out twigs and grass clumps from the wheel's spokes. She started to become aware of the discomfort in her hands, biting her fingernails down, allowing for a better grip. She was aware of so many things that she just never noticed before. And the more she became aware, the easier her travel got. Sure, she was in physical pain, being rather weak and scrawny in build, but she knew new tricks that made it much more manageable to deal with. And before she knew it, the cave was right before her. A gaping hole in the side of the hill was oddly squared, leading down to a long shaft into the earth. She never thought of it before, but the shape of the cave wasn't natural. Someone made this hole a long time ago. Pushing the load in, she looked up towards the ceiling, seeing the sentry hold rocks ready to throw down on intruders. She thought about it and realized that if intruders did enter the cave, he would never really stand a chance, and likely wouldn't warn any of the tribe. She quickly moved on with a worried frown. Moving down the tunnels into a large holding, she dumped the bodies into a larger pit of other dead goblins to be skinned and put into a stew that was a little more than meat and water. All just for the drive to fight over and potentially kill more of their own number for. And when the tribe's bellies were full, the breeding would begin. Yak shivered in fear. A massive mob meant only for reproduction. A tangle of violence, fighting for turns and killing one another. Just for the females to burst open in a few short months with 6 to 7 pups. The pups would grow in a few short months more and repeat the process over and over. Realizing that she may not even survive the process to get to breed, and she would die, struck fear deep into Yag, that time seemed to slow down. The tribe was just not sustainable. Its ways were far too brutish, with no self-awareness. The traps they laid in the road have alerted humans to their presence, and if the tribe didn't kill itself, the man in armor would. Yak wasn't sure when she got outside, the 4 moons shining bright on the trees, filtering long silver beams between the leaves. She never noticed the number of moons before. She wasn't even aware she could count. Well, at least now she could. A brisk shake of her head to clear her thoughts. The tribe was all but dead. Dead to her, at least. Her small frame was the way it was due to her not being able to get a full belly of food. Her weapons were always the weakest, clothing always the most torn and ratty. Scowling back at the cave, she took off, heading away from this death trap, away from the tribe. She would find out what was happening to her and how she could use it for her own advantage. She would make her own way in this life. Fox crouched behind a tree, looking at the small hill before him. An old mine shaft, clearly long abandoned, dug deep into it like a wound. Had to be the place. After returning to the pit that killed the necromancer he was chasing, he was not surprised to see the bodies gone. The tracks of a one-wheel vehicle and one small goblin were easy to follow. They led right to the old mine, a perfect goblin barrow. With a satisfied nod, Fox turned to the 4 men he had with him. "We found the nest," he told them. "The few I fought had little more than slightly shaped sticks. But be careful, we don't want any of you to get brained by one with a fist-sized rock." The men nodded, adjusting their helmets and hoisting shields and spears. Frock bought his own to bear. A sword would not be useful and the tunnel got tight. "2 of you on the mound. Be ready to shoot any coming in or any that slip past us. One female filled with pups could restart the whole infestation." Ducking his head, he moved in. The cold, damp stones were slick under his feet, and the sounds of goblins snoring ahead was loud and clear. The tribe was asleep. He may be able to kill off most of them. The sonic grunt gave Fox a start. Spinning around, one of the men was thrusting spear up into a small niche. A goblin slumped down, giving death kicks quickly setting in. Fox nodded, moving on. Only 1 guard. This was going to be easy. The scent of the main room was wretched. A large and clearly stolen pot was turned on its side, covering a number of goblins that all piled in a heap. Judging by some of the bite marks and missing limbs in some of them, Fox could guess a few died in the eating and breeding. A wave of his hand, and his 2 men set forth, spear raised and stabbing. Each stab brought a scream, a grunt, or a cry. Goblins shot up, some too sleepy to even notice what was happening until a spear pounced its foul, green, and greasy body. Some did manage to grab up weapons, trying to slay the intruders. More than once, a fist-sized rock, the shape or a sharpened rod of wood in a crude shape of an arrow or spear, bounced off a shield or plate. One of his men let out a scream as a group of goblins grabbed and grappled him down, dragging him to the ground and pulling his arms from his torso. The foul monsters didn't even wait for the pole sword to die before they started to feast on him. Fox made quick work of that pile. Stab, 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 stab. Slow, steady work to slay each goblin. And before he knew it, it was over. Breathing hard, the air thick with the smell of blood and goblin crud that turned his stomach. Taking a few quick moments to stab a few quivering bodies, he gathered the survivor and ushered him out of the cave. The fresh air was cleansing, the scent of slaughter still below. One of the men left his stand as he approached, ready for orders. "Lamp oil. Burn everything down there," he told him. Fox takes a seat on the hillside, using the moment to calm himself. The kingdom was safe from an awful fate of being overwhelmed by goblins. Good work has been done here today, and he and his men would be welcomed back as heroes. And that's the end of chapter 2.
Very
Riveting.
interesting. Very interesting. I like it.
Thank you.
I did like the imagery, but I gotta tell you, are you aware of Neckbeardia, Crow?
What's Neckbeardia?
Okay, it's a YouTube channel. They do a lot of like TG board readings. Anyways, they've ruined goblins for me.
All right.
You read quite well.
Thank you.
Yeah, he does really good work, I think.
But it's a lot of innocents dying today.
Goblins are not innocent.
No, they're not.
They're little more than rats in this setting.
Okay, that makes sense then. So
Cannibalistic rats. at that.
Cannibalistic, and I took everything that would be like disgusting, nasty, everything that people would naturally be repulsed to, and that is a goblin, which makes Yag special because she's becoming aware of her own existence, essentially.
Everyone is so goblin phobic around here.
Well, I mean, goblins are monsters.
At least in the settings that we read. I mean, someone could probably make goblins something else, but
I mean, like, it all depends on the setting. There's been a lot of stuff of like people's like, we need to treat all these monsters as if they were actual people, and it's like, that's fine for some settings, but not every setting. It's like, no, because they represent this group of people, and it's like, that's stupid.
Yeah.
Now I want my monsters to be
Very
monstrous.
It's just
Even
tragic.
as Yag,
It's just so tragic, though.
and as Yag becomes
Like,
more aware, it's not going to make her less of a monster. She's the villain of this story.
Tragic.
It's her story, but she's a villain. She's going to do awful things. It's just a fun experiment to see if I can make this complete monster, but a monster, but you like her essentially. I want her to be like one of those like villains you like to see because you want to see her eventually get defeated in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're off to a good start.
I would agree. I think like if you want to, I think like a good book for you might be. Have you heard of the Broken Empire trilogy?
No, I have not.
The main character is a psychopath, and it's first person the whole way through.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, well, it starts off with him burning a village and murdering an old man.
And it goes up and it goes uphill from there.
Well, he nukes a city.
Oh wow!
So yes, it does.
At the very
wow.
end of the first book.
That's inspiring.
Yeah, it's a unique experience. Like I heard Daniel Green, he's like, if you want to read a bad guy that makes you want to bathe, this is the book for you. And I was like, he can't be that bad. 5 minutes into the audiobook. Yep, he is that bad. Never mind. I shouldn't have doubted you.
So here's one from the chat. Hypatia. So goblins are like mosquitoes?
Yeah, I'm sure that you can.
I would say more like
pests,
rats.
pests, rats, insects, cockroaches, probably more appropriate.
It's called the Broken Empire trilogy. The first book is called Prince of Thorns. The second one's King of Thorns, and then Emperor of Thorns. I'll put it in the chat.
The answer to the second question you have there, Hypatia. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I probably am. What I meant to say is gold and diamonds, not gold and diamonds.
That would be a neat mineral, though.
Yeah, it would be.
Yes.
Fantasy world, blood diamonds.
I think I might be stealing that for foxes and demon slayers.
Not if I steal it first.
It's a race. In fact, I'm going to write gold and diamonds in my novel right now.
I'm going to beat you all. Diamond gold. There we go. I'll flip it. Now it's mine.
Golden.
I have culturally appropriated this slight mistaken word thing.
Yep, I wrote then the words golden diamond and I saved it. So it's not to worry, I'm gonna get rid of that later. I'm gonna delete that later.
Delete that footage.
So speaking of dungeons and accommodations, I've put a link in the private chat that it vaguely reminded me of.
I'll take a look at that. Let's see here.
Mm-hmm.
That's speaking of dungeons and accommodations.
Ooh, this is a freaking thing. You know, college is about more than your cell. Oh, what is it? First is a FATS housing. This is a thing on Oxford College?
Not
What?
really. Not really.
The phone number is 666-666-6666, for God's sake.
Oh, God. Okay.
Lord.
Oh yeah, as you can see here in this dungeon, we offer a wide variety of housing options for your minions.
Dynamic. The quality of the lodging is designed to immerse the student into the regimen of self-sacrifice and endurance of hardship evinced by the Fellowship of the Ring. That's such
I bet if you teamed up with Mothmaster, you could make the manga yourself.
Oh, I bet so.
Not if I team up with him first.
This
You're
You're teaming up with Blue for Smoke and Mirrors.
Yep.
Go subscribe to my comic, Smoke and Mirrors.
I can't say that I have. No, I have not.
That's how.
No, that's more of a Neph thing.
That's
Just
called,
from the name, no, it's not.
Redo of the healer.
I thought people like that.
Oh, let's keep going. Sorry, did I interrupt? Sorry if I interrupt you, Mr. Balerion.
That's housing offers a variety of residence hall options, ranging from the traditional a cell with a ball and chain and deluxe bags of straw for sleeping purposes to suites. Multiple cells sharing an outhouse.
I love it.
Maybe you had to be there.
I like it.
Uh-oh. It's got illustrations too. Anyway. I guess it's my turn to read now.
That is correct.
All right. Let me go back to the serious novel for this week. So this one is Lady Margaret. Hopefully people more or less remember what's happening. If not, I can explain it afterwards. Anxiety about Margaret's future was beginning to cast a pall over the whole castle. Indeed, one reason for Margaret's increased interest in swords was her greater awareness of her own vulnerability. This vulnerability, and the concomitant vulnerability of the estate, was very much on her parents' mind as well, and even her sister Audrey was worried about it. The trouble with a female heir was that the estate risked falling into alien and possibly hostile hands. Pylamar, the Count, was determined to keep Serthaton, the castle Serthaton, out of the clutches of Barunu if he could, especially since that would entail Margaret, and Audrey as well, also falling into said clutches, and thence, I fear, into the even the less salubrious clutches of Equique, the Emperor, he told his wife. We are experiencing a reprieve of sorts for now, but it cannot last forever. So by Margaret's 15th birthday, the Count had already been at work for some time at preparing a match with the son of the Duke of Darzaz. In spite of the Duke's prudent policies, Darzaz was not very fashionable at court, being rather too independent for palace tastes. But the plan was the best bet for maintaining some degree of autonomy and, Pylamar hoped, preventing unpleasant things from happening to his daughters. There was an urgent need to get Margaret, in particular, engaged, and Darzaz seemed the least bad option. "What will you tell Burunu?" asked the Countess. "Oh, we'll have to come up with something," said Pylamar with a nod, the equivalent of a shrug, and a helpless gesture. "We'll tell him that we are unworthy, that Margaret is not a good match, that the engagement was already agreed to, blah, blah, blah. Although I don't think this will end well, but what can one do? I fear we shall offend the governor." The Count shrugged again. "We've already offended the Emperor. What can the governor do that's worse? Will Darzaz be able or willing to defend her? I do not know. Probably up to a point. At least it's farther away from court. Why not send her to Polismu?" suggested Markaruna. "I have kin there." "The risks of getting intercepted on the way there are too great," replied the Count. So Darzaz it was. Therefore, he invited Duke Edrion of Darzaz and his daughter, Margaret's friend Sainlain, to Tserthaton. Edrion's son and heir, conveniently, if possibly confusingly, also named Edrion, was not explicitly named in the invitation, but was implicitly included under, "and whomsoever in your noble family you may wish to bring along." No reason was given for the invitation beyond the bland and unsurprising one of maintaining and confirming ties of friendship, which might have been anything or nothing. So the slave spy wasn't able to report anything very definite, although Prince Umpu'u and the Yaji had their suspicions. Emperor Ekwekwe mainly wanted Pylamar dead so he, exalted, could get the girl toy. And it took all Umpu'u and Malalaama's ingenuity and tact to keep him from ordering Pylamar's execution on the spot. Hold me a second. They even tried distracting him with Saranjis concubines that had been got up to look like her and Barama. That only worked for a brief time before Exalted got bored. Edrion's visit duly took place about a week before the Feast of Writing, on 16, oh God, can't even read my own languages, on 16 Shamyayura, about the 12th of May. Margaret and Sainlain had not seen each other for some years and had quite a bit of catching up to do. Margaret told her friend about the Sandaranian court. I'll be a second because there's an error in here. I need to. Margaret told her friend about the Sandaranian court, and the latter was half awed, half repelled. Sainlain, Margaret, and Adri spent much of their time making a puppet play about the Wonder Tower, but they were all older and less carefree, so they also spent a good deal of time discussing Margaret's situation as they went riding in the countryside, followed by their pets, Moraishu and Moraishuru, grazing contentedly. They rode all the way up to Lake Eglom, where the reflections of the cypresses and pine trees and beech trees in the water seemed even more beautiful than aforetime. "I hope the monster fish doesn't get us," said Audrey. "He can't get you unless you fall into the lake," said Margaret. "And the sharks will probably get you first anyway. Or maybe the giant worms." "That's not very consoling," said Audrey. "I have other things to worry about right now than the monster fish," said Margaret, almost snappily. "That's a beautiful horse." Sainlain tactfully change the subject. The name Starlight becomes her. Thank you, said Margaret, scratching her mare behind the ears. Starlight behaves well, too. I never have to discipline her at all, and she seems to read my mind and know exactly how fast to go. She's almost never frightened, added Audrey. I've seen her trot at the edge of a ravine without showing the least fear. They began riding back towards Serthaton in silence. You're lucky, Margaret told Sanem presently. You won't have to inherit the title, so it doesn't matter who you marry. You can afford to wait and needn't worry about turning down suitors. I don't want to marry at all, said Sanem. Nobles are too creepy, and I daren't think of marrying a commoner. I think I'll become a Yajani, a priestess. I want to marry, said Audrey, but not yet, she added shyly. It's pretty awful, said Margaret. I don't even want to think about this. But I have to, because the creepy governor wants to marry me and get all father's lands for himself. And then our people will be ruled by foreign lickspittles. And that creepy emperor is waiting for me at court and wants me in the Barusa. Disgusting. Yes, I don't envy you, said Saneline. I'm glad we're far from court and Darzaz and don't have to deal with court politics much. Let's tell our fortunes with fruit, said Audrey. I hate politics. I'm not sure I want to know my fortune, said Margaret, but they did anyway. Mine is unblemished, but split in half, said Audrey. That means you will enjoy happiness, but only a brief time, said Saneline. Mine is small, which means that I will have a quiet life. Good. Mine is large and has a lot of red juice, said Audrey. I don't want to know what that means. Let's play something else. So they gathered some materials to make some puppets for the Feast of Writing, first picking up sticks to use for the frames and rods. Then, with their parents' permission, they went to obtain cloth from storage. It was usual to carry banners with the shapes of letters of the alphabet in procession on that day. But Audrey had wanted to make puppets of the letters instead. Margaret pretended to be far too old for such things, but shortly became more enthusiastic than either of the other two. Let's have the letters do a dance that ends with them spelling a Waramotic text. But which text? One of the texts about justice. Meanwhile, Pylamar and the Duke were having their own discussions about arranging a match between the Duke's son and Margaret. The details of the negotiations would be dull and involve a lot of technical information about inheritance and property, into which it's hardly necessary to go. The Duke certainly had no objection to expanding his family's holdings, but Pylamar naturally wanted to avoid, to the extent possible, the complete absorption of his patrimony, and therefore insisted on a provision whereby, if Edrion and Margaret had issue, Darzaz was to go to one child and Serthaton to another. Pardon me 1 second. To another. The Duke agreed to this on condition that the eldest son inherit Darzaz. Also, on account of the sticky political situation, it was decided to keep the engagement a secret for the time being, to the extent possible. They did, however, draft letters to the Yaji Malala Ama, Prince Umpu'u, and the Emperor, announcing the marriage in the most groveling tone Pylamar could stomach. For arranging a marriage without informing Exalted Box could be deadly. Once they'd hammered out a deal, it was time for the couple to be formally introduced. So the three girls had to break up their puppet play preparations and be, quote, social, end quote. Upon meeting Edrion the Younger, Margaret saw that he had grown tall, but was a little in want of color and personality. My lady, the flower of righteousness, blossomed like a flower indeed, A rare flower of surpassing beauty, said Edrion in a slightly bored voice. His tutor had helped him come up with this compliment, but Margaret hardly needed to know that. My lord graces me with great grace, replied Margaret with a curtsy, in the Turanian fashion, by bending the knees and holding the arms akimbo. The trees are lovely in your land, said Edrion, bowing, also in the Turanian fashion. As they are in Darzaz, they are for the most part the same trees. Your wit is as great as your beauty, said Edrion after a brief pause. I'm hungry, he thought. How long will I have to do this? Shall we have a little rain, do you think? Said Margaret after a slightly longer pause. The conversation continued along these lines for several awkward minutes, and then, mercifully, it was time for the banquet, after which came the ball, the water drum serenade, the ... Getting engaged was a lot of work. I'm bored, thought Margaret. I'm bored, but at least the food is good, thought Adrian the younger. Food in Darzaz is rubbish. What do you think? Asked Pylamar when he, Markaruna, and Margaret were alone. Does the match please you? Well, I'm too young, said Margaret. He is 18 and I am only 15, and he is, well, good looking, but rather cold. You don't necessarily have to marry him if you get engaged. Engaged, said Markaruna. Engagements may be broken off at any time. It's not like marriage, which can only be dissolved for a few causes and fewer still if one is female. And in the meantime, the engagement may protect you from other suitors, added the Count. You cannot be made to marry anyone else unless and until the engagement is called off. And Darzaz is about as far away from Exalted as you can get. Never forget, though, this is only a lull, and we're not safe yet. We may never be safe. Considering the alternatives, Edrion can be a good deal worse, agreed Markaruna. Like Bruno, or the Emperor, or, well, most of the Sandrainian nobility. He's worth it to have some kind of protection from the Barusa. All right, then, said Margaret. I'll agree to be engaged if he wants it. Edrion didn't terribly want it, finding Margaret rather too young. She is still half a child, and I am a grown man. I'm hungry, he added randomly. They have better food here, I must grant. It isn't as though there were a lot of choice for suitable matches, though, said the Duke. We're under a bit of a cloud at court, though I hope to change that, and consequently not very popular with people looking for marriage partners. And she will grow up in a few years. True, said Edrion. I dare say she'll do. She's cute, and maybe lovely by the time she's of marriageable age. And the food is good here. I'm hungry. Duke Edrion shrugged. Let's see. How much is that? Okay, just a couple more paragraphs. So the engagement was agreed upon. The next step was finding two secular witnesses, other than the parents who didn't count, to testify to the arrangement, alongside the Yajis of both families. For an actual wedding, 2 Yajanis would have been required, but they weren't needed for a mere engagement. The requirement was in any case often waived on account of the shortage of Yajanis. They decided to ask Garawada and Umuni to serve as witnesses, as they didn't want the engagement to be too widely known, at least not yet. And so Pylamar sent a very polite invitation to the castle, the Ambata. Upon receiving the invitation, Garawada and Umuni sent a letter of acceptance, and the 3 parties to the engagement decided to have the betrothal in 3 months. This agreement was made by courier since the Darzazians had returned to their homeland the day after Marga and Edrion the Younger had consented to the engagement. Okay, I think I better stop there.
That works.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Very intriguing.
Good. Nothing too, not too confusing, I hope.
No, it's pretty clear.
I'm going to give you some criticism, and I'm going to be blunt. If you keep using the word boring, your reader's going to get bored. I'm sorry. It's just.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! What
Jesus
happened?
Christ!
Okay, what happened, Derek?
Dude, it was just a criticism.
What? Let's see. Make a note of that. Well, it's just one character. There's one character who likes to say I'm bored a lot.
Yeah, one thing that I did notice that I thought was very amusing. I thought the bit of "I'm hungry" is like, yeah, that's the average male.
I thought I honest to God for a moment thought I was hearing a script read of Disenchantment.
That is.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I kind of would like to see is kind of like, I guess, scenery and like the movements of characters. That's the only thing that I would like to see more of. That's the only
Which of? I'm sorry. Say that again.
more character movements in between dialogue.
Oh yeah. Okay.
That's,
Yeah.
since I think that your dialogue works really well and like you do really good when like there's paragraphs and descriptions, but sometimes it's just like it kind of moves into talking head syndrome a little bit.
Yeah, it does. That's one of the reasons why I've tried to become so descriptive with what my characters are doing when they're talking.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll have to make a note of that. Pardon me a second. I need to grab my.
Well, that's what editing is for.
Yeah. Yep. There has been plenty of that, and I dare say there'll be more of it.
Yeah.
Alrighty. I think.
Oops! I just knocked down a glass of water.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Also. So.
Yeah. Sometimes I put little comments in.
Yeah. Let me think.
So let's see, character movements and bored. Well, everyone's the kind of chap who gets bored a lot or is boring a lot.
Well, how about instead of just have him saying he's bored, have him use
Maybe
synonyms,
or even like have him move in a bored way, like he yawns, or
like
something.
he's tapping
Yeah.
his fingers against the table or something. Like his leg is kicking, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, nervous habits that people do when they're not paying attention.
Yeah, because he's like chronically bored and boring. He's he's almost a caricature. He didn't start as a character, but he sort of turned into like kind of a caricature. He'll just say things like, "I'm hungry, I'm bored."
Oh, I think maybe like something that might work really well is kind of like have like interesting things contrast around him.
Yeah.
He's just too dumb to notice them.
That might be amusing. Might be. Oh, what chapter is this? This is chapter 7.
Mm-hmm.
Making them out. Which chapter again? Oh, and Becca says Tarek got destroyed by Balerion's hurricane of rage. That's the real reason I burned down that city. It's your fault I burned down that city, Tarek chap.
Yeah, he's got the attention span of a gnat, basically.
Yeah, and he's kind of bored. He's kind of like colorless and boring.
I am so glad you brought up I'm so glad you brought up arson, Balerion, and now we have a finger to point at. Because that's the chapter we're doing today. Congratulations, you played yourself.
It was my psychic power. My psychic powers.
Yeah.
All right, should I go?
Yeah. Yeah, go for
All
it.
right. All right. So as a quick refresher of last week, Aviana went out to get some water to drink, and she wound up running into a figure who she chased throughout the city, trying to get a reward from it, hoping to take him into the Guardians. He got away, but she was left with a silver coin. She has no idea what it is, but before she could investigate, Merrick revealed he's leaving and joining the Guardians, and he has one last request of her before he leaves to become a Guardian Initiate. And that's where we leave. That's where we begin today. So without further ado, even though Merrick was with her this time, Aviana's body still felt uneasy as the two of them crossed the bridge into the wards. When they arrived, they were greeted with the familiar sight of bombed-out buildings and ruined timber. The streets were mostly empty, aside from the occasional mumbling vagrant wearing tattered and torn clothing with their skin exposed to the elements. The two of them walked in silence towards the western end of the wards and arrived in a square surrounded by buildings in various states of disrepair. Many of them were little more than collapsed timber and stone, with some being even little more than ash. Standing in front of them at the far end of the square was the only building that still looked relatively stable. It was a long two-story building that had the right side of its roof cratered with blackened wood sticking out of it like spikes. The left wing hadn't fared much better, as there was a large hole in the roof exposing the interior of the building, as well as allowing snow to pile inside. All of the glass windows had been shattered, and most of the stone and wood of the structure the structure was built from were darkened and gray. Aviana had seen the building only a few times in its current state, but she usually did everything she could to avoid coming near it. Every time she came to this place, it tore at her heart to see the condition of the orphanage that she and Merrick once called home. Aviana noticed Merrick's body stiffen as he tried to approach the front door, which was swinging in the wind, as the wood that once held the lock and latch had been torn from the door. She heard Merrick take another deep breath as he forced his body to move forward one slow step at a time, with his body clearly fighting him each step of the way. Though Merrick was making progress, her body refused to follow him. Her eyes were beginning to water at the thought of entering. Yet she could see on Merrick's face that tears were already beginning to drip down his cheeks. She closed her eyes tightly and forced her arm to reach out and grab Merrick's hand, squeezing it as hard as she could and forcing herself to walk at his pace. She felt Merrick stop. She opened her eyes to see him looking at her. His eyes were red and puffy, yet there was a small comforting smile on his lips. Both of them walked slowly onto the steps of the building and through the swinging door. The interior of the building looked no better than the exterior. The stone floors of the foyer were darkened with ash and soot, with bits of glass and other debris scattered all over the ground. Every step they took resulted in the sound of snapping and cracking under their feet as they stepped on fallen pieces of wood. The wooden stairs leading up to the second floor were splintered, with several planks jutting out and others completely missing. Even with Merrick holding her hand, she didn't want to be there. She wanted to run away and never think or see this place again. Yet she continued to follow him further into the hall, keeping her eyes on the back of his head. She only turned away from Merrick when they passed by a doorway leading to a large dining area. The room housed a long wooden table that was smashed and bent down the middle. Around the remains of the table were 6 wooden chairs on each side, and one at the very end, all of which were little more than mold-covered kindling. Wooden plates lay shattered and broken, with their various pieces scattered all over the room's floor, and the foul smell of rotting food emanated from the floor and what looked like to be black piles of slime. It was then she realized just how foul the smell of the building was. The scent of mold, ash, soot, and rot surrounded her, and no matter where she turned, all she could smell was death and decay. Aviana twisted and pulled her arm in an attempt to free herself from Merrick's grip. She knew it would only get worse from here, and she didn't want to see it. Yet Merrick held her hand tighter and turned towards her. There was a desperate expression on his face now, and his eyes looked more desperate than she had ever seen them. Though her heart and mind were racing, she continued to follow him up the stairs, avoiding the protruding planks and nails along the way. When they reached the top of the stairs, they encountered a hallway where the path diverged left and right. Merrick finally let go of her hand and walked towards the left slowly, approaching the door, taking a deep breath every step. He reached his trembling hand onto the dirty brass knob, causing it to shake and bob. Merrick attempted to turn it, but his hand wouldn't move correctly and only resulted in the knob jingling. Aviana walked over to him and placed a hand on his shoulder, doing her best to hide her discomfort as she gave Merrick a nod. Relaxing, Merrick's hand stopped trembling and he opened the door. The two were greeted by the sight of a large pile of snow that had built up in the center of the room. The roof itself was starting to cave in, with wooden planks bending downward, almost touching the room's wooden floor. The window at the furthest part of the room was empty of glass, with the remains on the floor for some unaware fool to step on. 6 simple beds sat against the right wall, each equal distance away from each other, all of them torn and covered with mold, with the straw innards of the mattress emptying out onto the floor. Merrick silently walked away from Aviana and only stopped when he arrived at the 4th bed. He sat down on the blackened colored mattress and looked out the large hole exposing the square. "Thank you for coming with me," Merrick said, his voice coarse and shaky. "I know you didn't want to come here, but it means everything to me that you did." Aviana opened her mouth to speak, but she couldn't find the words and closed it as Merrick continued. "It never gets easier. It eventually starts to hurt less, but the pain never leaves." He began only to go silent for a moment, then turning his head to Aviana and looking her in the eyes. "I miss them, Aviana. I miss them every day. My father, my mother, Matron Alessia, Varric, Renault, Darren, Rolf, Gavin, Alex, Delilah, Elena, Muriel, and Isabel. I miss them all," Merrick said, his voice cracking as he wiped away tears from his cheeks. Suddenly, Merrick's breathing became harsh as he inhaled and exhaled, harder and louder. "Sometimes I curse Tyrion's name for how much he's taken from me," Merrick said, his voice shaky and scratchy, caught somewhere between sorrow and fury as his nails dug into the mattress. "It wasn't enough for them to take one family. I had to lose both. It's not fair!" Merrick shouted, his cheeks turning a bright shade of red, as did his eyes. He slammed his foot into the floor, causing a loud slamming sound that echoed through the room, as well as causing a wooden floorboard to snap and fall to the first floor. Aviana stood silently, unsure what to do, yet she found herself walking over to him and sitting on the bed beside him. You never told me how your mother and father died," Aviana stated quietly. Merrick sat quiet for a few moments before he began to speak. I was 7. My family and I were sleeping when we awoke to the sounds of screaming. When we went outside, we saw that our village was ablaze. Homes were burning, stores exploding, wheat fields shining as bright as the sun. My father ran out to help, braving the burning homes and getting as many people out as he could. I was fetching water from a nearby river when we attempted to put out the fires. I watched him run into another house when suddenly there was a loud snap and the entire building fell on him. After we lost our village, my mother and I came here, hoping to find sanctuary and a new place to live. She got ill on the way, and by the time we arrived, she was very weak and frail. She died after begging Matron Alessia to take me in." Merrick turned his head back towards the hole and went silent for another few moments before he began to speak again. "I never learned who or what started the fires. I've heard so many different stories of what caused them. Barbarians, mercenaries, even monsters. But I never found the true answer." Aviana noticed that Merrick has balled his hands into a fist and that he was shaking, causing the bed to wobble. He then turned back to face her, his bright blue eyes alight with righteous fury. "That's why I want to become a guardian, to protect people and ensure that no one else has to suffer the way I did," Merrick said before turning away, wiping tears from his eyes. "Please, just give me a few moments," Merrick said softly. Aviana slowly got off the bed, the rotting wooden floor creaking as she stood up and walked through the door into the hallway. As to the staircase, she found herself staring at the other end of the hallway where a wooden beam had fallen, blocking the door. Tears began to roll down her cheeks as her mind was assaulted with screams, cries, and pleads for help. There was nothing I could do, Aviana mumbled as she shook her head, tears falling from her cheeks. The screaming and crying only grew louder as they seemed to surround her now. She covered her ears and closed her eyes and fell to her knees, shaking her head in a vain attempt to silence their cries. Please, stop. I'm sorry. Please forgive me, she begged. The voices stopped when she felt a hand press against her shoulder. When she turned around and looked, she saw Merrick standing over her. She wrapped herself around his legs and began sobbing into his pant leg. It's my fault, Merrick. It's all my fault. They're gone. There was nothing you could have done, Merrick said, gently stroking her hair as she continued to sob. Aviana had just finished rubbing her eyes when she felt the stinging cold winds brush against her wet, puffy cheeks as the two of them exited the orphanage. However, instead of them being in the square, they were instead in the back lot of the orphanage. The trees that had once decorated the lot were now blackened husks with twigs attached to them, and the grass and garden that had once been brimming with life were now just a dead field with snow covering the top of it. At the back of the wrought iron fence, close to the wrought iron fence, 11 scorched stones sat. You don't have to follow me this time, Merrick said as he began walking towards the stone, his boots causing snow to crunch and leaving tracks with each step. She watched as Merrick stopped at each stone monument and heard him mumble a few quiet words. He continued this until he reached the last grave, where he stood in front of it, his body shaking, but he began to mumbling something. Once he finished, he returned to Aviana, his face now as cold as stone, as he led her away from the graves. The two departed out the back lot gate and walked through the square. Thank you for coming with me. I couldn't bring myself to go inside alone, Merrick said somberly. I thought you visited the orphanage just the other day, Aviana responded, now calm enough to speak. I visit the graves, but I haven't been inside for a long time. I just want to go inside one more time and pay my respects before I leave. Do you want to at least visit your mother's grave before you go? Merrick shook his head. She was the first person I told about leaving when I woke up this morning. Can you please promise me you'll visit her every so often? Aviana nodded. She had visited the grave with Merrick on numerous occasions. It was just outside the city in a gated field that was thankfully spared when Lareth invaded. The plot had cost every dharma Merrick had brought with him when he arrived in Tyrion, and even a little more from Machen Alessia. Yet it was enough to ensure that his mother got a grave and wasn't just buried in an unknown hole with a group of other people who couldn't afford one. Thank you, Merrick said graciously as the two of them walked away from the square and away from their former home. And that's it for this week.
I could really feel the Merrick's emotions when you were reading his lines. I'm near tears myself because of how powerful that was.
Yeah, it's very, very good, I have to say.
Thank you. I really do appreciate that.
Man, that was great. Really sad.
Yeah, very somber. Hopefully something perky will come up next time.
I don't know.
I keep promising this to Becca, but we're close to the end of Act 1, and I meant to say this I think 2 showcases ago, but we passed 100 pages. The thing is that this is really supposed to set the scene about why she is the way, why she makes the decisions she makes. I'm not saying she makes stupid decisions, but
makes characters that
she's 12. She's
going to
make stupid decisions.
Well, the thing is that in my opinion, even a child knows their action has consequences, especially in this kind of world. I really need to sell this depression in order for people to understand just how dire the situation is.
Mm-hmm.
And
you did.
And As I was telling Becca the other day, that's going to make the moment when things start going right for her all the sweeter.
I concur. It's definitely a good way of thinking about it.
Oh, it reminds me of Kaladin, where at the beginning of the book, I'm like, dude, you need to stop making nasty things happen to this chap. And then eventually
Things go right? Yeah.
things certainly go better.
Uh-huh.
It gets better. It gets frickin' better.
But here's the part that maybe like that I got it, that I'm driving home with everything else. It's that things will get better, but the caveat is she has to work for it. She has to work for things to get better. She will be tested. Her entire, I'm trying to think of the right word here, not her work ethic, but her resilience, if you will be tested to its limits. But if she can succeed, things will get better for her. But but the most rewarding thing is that she made them happen herself. Nobody just gave it to her. She earned what she receives.
Yeah.
Good way of looking at it.
I like it, personally.
Yes.
Thank you.
I like it too. I'm intrigued to see where it goes.
Yep, we're very engaged.
Indeed. Alrighty. So, I did a poll on the Discord yesterday of what you guys would like me to read. And there were a few options. And actually, the landslide win, I'll actually read out the options real quick. Just so people know what the poll was, since if you want to take part in the poll, you want to control what I read, I am your puppet. Just vote in the Discord. So the three. So with what I got was the next chapter of Battle of the Seven Suns. First chapter of Skyfire, my superhero Civil War idea before I saw the movie. A crime stakeout with elemental magic, a la Avatar: The Last Airbender. A single combat situation where between two people with gravity power, one power with gravity powers, the other with ethereal powers. A vision quest in War of Shadow, the second book of the Dark Champion trilogy, and that was it. The landslide win with 10 votes was a crime stakeout with elemental magic. The second one with 5 votes was the single combat one. The Vision Quest got 4 votes, and then Skyfire got 3 votes. So in that order, we will be reading that over the next few weeks. But this week, we'll do the stakeout one.
What about Dragon Blasters?
I've read that 3 times, I think.
But that was like months ago. That was ages ago.
Yeah, you only read it 3 times.
Well, the thing is, I'm going to be publishing it in July. I just need to get it edited up.
It's the dim and misty depths of time by now. It's like a lost golden age of our youth.
Your youth
Keeps me
mine.
up at night.
I'm a dig.
Die, Dunchap, die. So to speak.
That's going to be a long time. Hopefully.
Hopefully.
So
I didn't say right away.
Yeah. That works, or at least dice in some painful measure for introducing us to School of Movies and Maggie Mayfish. You probably would never have heard of those people without me.
Our lives would be much happier.
Yes, because we wouldn't have to be reminded of the rotten fish every couple of weeks.
I blame you. All problems in my life, I blame you.
Yeah.
Yes. Blame it's hashtag blame done for Maggie Mayfish forever. Alrighty. So working title for this is Clash of Shards, since this is originally a Avatar: The Last Airbender series 3 idea, but I'm going to do some editing on it and turn it into an original property. So, okay. The massive Ethereum portal in the center of Hub Shaper Metropolis kept the otherwise dank and dingy mess of the slums somewhat well illuminated 24/7. Lieutenant Detective Anne Bayona breathed quietly as she watched the perp she'd been assigned to tail walk into their grungy apartment complex. Casually, she reached into the pocket of her long gray and black trench coat and pulled out a large coin. Absently, she rolled the coin along the back of her fingers, using metal shaping to assist her only slightly. They'd been waiting in the alleyway closest to the apartment complex for at least 4 hours, one or the other of them going off for coffee or donuts. Finally, we got something. Her partner, Detective Lee, a fire shaper, reheated his coffee with a quick burst of fire at the bottom of the canteen before quaffing it in one gulp. The fire illuminated his thin face for an instant, dark eyes and dark hair contrasting with the bright light fire. Casually, Anne pushed off the wall she'd been leaning against and started toward the building. Anne's short, deep black Bayona hair was tied back behind her head, carefully tucked inside her wide-brimmed hat. She hated the fact that anybody who looked at her could tell who her family was. Lee carefully hung his canteen on a special loop on his belt, then followed after her. These perps aren't worth it, Anne, Lee remarked. We should be waiting outside gang bosses' houses, or something actually useful. Maybe then we could actually get some funding. And continue washing the apartment. This was standard Lee, complaining about them not being able to do much to clean up the city. The only way to hunt the big fish is to cut their business innocence from underneath them, she countered, flexing her metal-clad fingers. These slime bags are rich enough that no matter how much evidence we level at them, we'll never put them away. It might look good short-term, but that good press is slowly going to go away after a month, and then we're back to square one. But at least we'd be sure we keep our jobs. Lee tugged his bowler hat off and carefully folded it so he could put it in his pocket. These people won't give us any kind of publicity. There are a few bosses we could take down, she said firmly. These guys could lead us to one of the Purple Triad bosses. Then we can take him down also. We should be dealing with mob bosses and corrupt politicians more than petty thieves and muggers. Lee put his hand on her shoulder. Why are we trying to fight the people that aren't really doing that much harm? Because their bosses protect the murderers and the rapists. Anne pointed down at a fallen newspaper lying on the ground, and an image of a known murderer getting released on early parole on the front page. If we don't take them out, their cronies will just get out of jail, and we have the same problem again. Then we should kill them, Lee muttered. Take them out permanently. Immediately, Anne turned and punched him in the arm. We don't kill people without cause, she glared at him. We don't take justice in our own hands without proof that there's no other option. That's what happened with the Red Sun and Sharon Cora. She almost died because Zephyr decided it was the best for the world. The Sharon cycle ended right there and in there. Yeah, but where is the Sharon now? Lee demanded. Nowhere. Sharon cycle's over. It ended with that Sharon Cora. There has to be a Sharon, Anne argued, carefully controlling her tone. She couldn't let him know what she did. Somewhere, there's a person in the rock shaper empire that can bend all elements. It can shape all elements. It's been decades since Sharon Cora died, and nobody's shown up claiming to be even new Sharon, Lee countered. Yeah, we don't know about Sharon Cora until she showed up in Hub Shaper Metropolis, but that was when she was a teenager. If my math is right, this new Sharon is going to be a person in their mid-30s. Surely they mastered the 4 elements by now. I don't know why the Sharon has gone missing, and knocked on the entry door to the complex. We just need to fix what we can until he or she gets here. Probably a guy. Lee took out his badge and held it in preparation for the person opening for when the person opened the door. Last one was a girl. It's got to be a guy. There isn't a predictable pattern with which its gender the Sharon is going to be, and adjusted her own badge so it was more visible on her lapel. Let's go back. Cora, girl. Roku, boy. Kiyoshi, girl. Some water shaper guy named Korin. I remember his name is because Sharon Korra is named after him. And the girl air shaper I don't remember the name of. Okay, so what I can see, all the water tribe all all the water tribe people are the most reckless of the shards. Lee cut off and grinned as the landlady opened the door. Upshaper Metro Police Department, ma'am. He held up his badge. We're looking for a couple mustached guys with a big crate. Please leave. If the landlady said quietly, trying to force the door or close. This is a clean establishment. A clean establishment. And put her metal to boot in the door before it could close. She didn't need to look inside to see the scantily dressed woman on the other side of the door to know exactly what kind of establishment this place was. They know before they left the precinct. We know this is a good old-fashioned pleasure house, she said quietly. If you let us through, we won't close down your business. We just want the men upstairs. Please, humor us. They'll kill us, the madam whispered. Please, can't you look aside just this once? Anne reached into her jacket and pushed the photograph of a husband and wife with their 2 children to the lady's face. These people were murdered by the guests you're harboring, she said flatly. If you keep them under your roof, you're endorsing their behavior, and the madam flinched, then slowly opened the door. Hair. All right, then you better kill them, or they'll get out of prison and kill me for helping you. Anne nodded and pushed through the door and pulled out her stone discs from her belt. Her earth-shaping skills and techniques were far more advanced than any of the other Earthers, mostly because of her Bayona heritage. More than just moving Earth around, she could heat it to magma or make it so red hot that it could cut through anything. She breathed out almost like a fire shaper, but her concentration was on vibrating the molecules in the stone discs rather than expelling the heat outward from hands or feet. The discs began glowing with a slight heat as she moved through the garishly lit corridors of the pleasure house, even as Lee conjured up fire knives. So, should we kill them here or bring them in? Lee asked, falling into a fire-shaping guard stance. Anne considered, if they try to kill us, we'll fight back, she decided. Seeming satisfied, Lee grinned and casually glanced around at the pretty girls. Sighing, Anne rolled her eyes. They're way out of your league, she remarked, sliding her foot along the ground to sense the vibrations to the earth. For the most part, it was men and a couple women having a good time together, but one room had only 2 men counting stacks of cash. 6th room on the left, she muttered, indicating the woman in question with a wave of the hand. Okay, what's our plan of attack? Lee turned to face the other direction, carefully watching the hallway behind them. I'll get them with pieces of spinning rocks aimed at the hands and feet, she said quietly. You start the attack by blinding them with a quick burst of fire. Aunt Lee smiled and hefted his knives. Sure thing, boss. Breathing slowly, Anne stepped in front of the door, then waved her hand over the lock. The metal bits inside the door clicked together softly, unlocking the door in a matter of seconds. Her disc rose up to hover over her palm, then glowed red hot and started spinning. She licked her teeth, then set herself with her left hand and close to her right arm where her rock bands were held. Now ready to fight, Anne nodded to Lee. The other detective kicked open the door, then threw an extremely bright burst of fire at the enemy, then halted the fire with a flick of the hand before it could spread. Anne leaped through the door, flicking her hand along her arm, sending pieces of flexible rock at the thieves' arms and legs. The rock bands clamped onto their intended targets with a satisfying clank, followed by a thud as Anne made a quick downward motion to throw her quarry to the ground. Smirking, Lee walked forward, then folded his arms. Well, that was quite easy. Yeah, that was the point. And spun around, waving her spinning disc, and saw that the madam was standing behind her with a ball of fire over her hand. You should never have come here, the madam remarked, nodding to the side. 2 hulking men with aquapolis tattoos stepped up beside her, raising their hands in a raised hands. Thick tendrils of water snaked up from the pot behind them and began swirling around the 2 water shapers. You should have left. And began hyperventilating as soon as she saw the water shapers. Flashes of blackness rose up in her mind, image of a spirit in the middle of a large field trying to choke her with black tendrils. She reacted instantly. She threw the whirling stone blade at the first water shaper, then swung her metal cables at the traitor's fire-shaping madam. Instantly, the water shaper struck the wall, clutching his crushed throat, but the madam deflected the attack directed at her with a burst of fire. In a controlled motion, Lee punched forward, ending several aggressive fireballs at the fire shaper. The remaining water shaper blocked the fireballs with a shield of water, then shot pieces of the shield at Lee and Anne. Anne spun to the side, then pulled a pair of rocks from her coat and began spinning them over her hand. The stones glowed bright red as she quickly heated the molecules inside them. She hurled the spinning rocks at the water shaper, but the fire shaper blasted the rocks aside with a jet of fire. The flames were rising around them, the wooden structure of the house catching fire and spreading rapidly. Anne pulled her disc and rock back to her hand, then threw them at the fire shaper just as Lee attacked with a few quick bursts of flame. The water shaper deflected the attack, then fired a piece of ice at them. Anne blocked a few of the pieces, but a couple of them sliced her arm inside. Grunting, she dropped to the ground and hurled a spinning rock disc at the water shaper. He stumbled backward, then yelled as she cut at the ground from under him, quite literally. He fell down, crashing to the floor below with a sickening crunch. The fire shaper glanced from Anne to her fallen lackey, then back again. See you another time, he hissed, thrusting her hand out and sending out 2 jets of fire. Smoke immediately filled the hall, obscuring their attacker as the fire shaper fled from the house. Coughing, Anne and Lee ran after their perps, but as soon as an explosion of fire in front of them caused them to halt. Lee split the fire in front of them just enough to pass through, but it was too late. The fire split too much for even him to control. We have to get everyone out of the house, Anne coughed, then quickly spun a red disc around her and Lee, cutting a hole in the floor and sending them crashing to the floor below. Fire! Get out! Anne yelled, pulling Lee by the sleeve toward the exit. The screaming girls ran out of the house, clutching as many of their personal belongings as they could, though many of them had nothing to grab due to the limited time. Anne spun around, trying to find where the quarry had fled to, but they were gone. Gah! She yelled, kicking a garbage can over, then slamming her foot down on the metal container. It crunched and bent as she mashed into a warp's approximation of what it had been. She clenched her fist and threw the warped trash can into the fire with a quick burst of metal shaping. Her arm and side still stung from where the water shaper had cut her. Swallowing, she picked up a rock, then set her teeth as she prepared to cauterize the injury. The sting of failure was almost as bad as the horrible sensation of the red-hot rock touching her skin. Lee looked pretty angry, but he didn't express his rage as vehemently as she did. We'll have to report this to your cousin, he remarked sourly, after we call the fire department. They're on their way already. Anne nodded toward the sounds of bells ringing down the street. She sighed tiredly at the sounds of a police car siren coming from the opposite direction. And that will be my cousin. Corin was not a typical water shaper. For one thing, he didn't dress in a shade of blue to show what kind of shaper he was. He always wore gray, with a small red silk scarf tied loosely around his neck. The police chief got out of his car and rubbed his eyes to the side of the burning pleasure house. Again, Anne, he asked, with his arms in a gracefully wavy motion. Long tentacles of water rose from the cisterns in the ground, then washed over the burning building. The other water shapers he brought with him began swinging their arms, throwing torrent after torrent of water into the blaze. Soon enough, it was put out, but by that point, Corin looked very tired. Did you catch them? He asked, not taking his eye off the smoldering husk that remained. Put a tail on them? No, Anne admitted, shoving her hands to her pockets and looking down in shame. Sorry. It's okay. You'll get them next time. Just try not to burn down the lair so that we lose all the evidence next time. Anne flinched her cousin's firm tone. He turned toward her. His accusatory eyes made her stiffen in shame. Why does this continue to happen? He rubbed his eyes and turned aside. And why? It wasn't my fault, Anne muttered. They had a fire shaper. We didn't see it coming. You're dealing with more than just what you can see in front of you, Corin said quietly. You should have been ready for an attack from other people than just your immediate targets. If this keeps going, you're going to be one of the fastest dropouts from the police force in the history of Hubshaper Metropolis. I'll get them next time, Anne grumbled. I don't know, Anne, Corin said, rubbing his eyes. I'm really disappointed in you. Please do better next time. We need a win right now, or our funding is going to get cut. If that's what you're worried about, I can get the funding to keep our family alive. Anne snapped and turned away. I'm done here, she said flatly. I need to check on my girls. And you need a doctor, Corin yelled after her, but Anne ignored him. She stalked toward her Sautocycle. The two-wheeled contraption was a lot cheaper than a Sautomobile and was much more maneuverable in a fight. Thankfully, Corin didn't follow her. He probably would have turned violent if he did. She'd done everything she could, and all she got was disappointment. Well, at least she could actually do good with her other job. I'm fine, she yelled as she turned on the machine, then took off along the street, arm and side still hurting despite her quick improvised surgery. Lights illuminating the street around her, and quickly weaved her way through the cars and pedestrians. She felt so tired. She'd been up since 3 this morning. She was in for a long day tomorrow at her second job. Thankfully, she had some time to play with her daughters and get some sleep before going out again. The apartment where she lived was not the most run-down place in Hubshaper Metropolis, but it was pretty close. It was made from shabby sheet metal, dim lightings. The windows were only on the top floor, where the somewhat more well-off people lived. Anne was not well off. She lived on the ground floor in a tiny apartment with limited hot water, electricity, and on top of that, she had to share the space with a massive spirit vine. As soon as she got close, she halted her Sautocycle, then pushed it forward into the small garage she was assigned to. She felt a slight dampness on her side as she lowered the garage door and locked it carefully. Oh, come on, she muttered, putting her hand to her side and feeling a steady stream of blood on her skin. Cauterizing it wouldn't be enough. She'd have to sew it up. She breathed in, gathering her resolve, then started limping toward her apartment on the ground floor. Her red-stained fingers fumbled with the keys for a moment. The blood had made her hands somewhat slippery. Finally, she managed to get the key in the lock, but finally turned it. Mommy! Azure yelled as she opened the door. The dark-haired girl and her twin sister, Lynn, ushered the door across the small living room and kitchen to embrace Anne warmly. Lynn had shorter hair than Azure, who might have been mistaken for her big sister rather than her twin because of the noticeable height difference. You're back! Azure snuggled her head into Anne's shoulder while her sister rested hers on her mother's uninjured side. Anne smiled and hugged the two 12-year-old girls to her. Lynn noticed the red spot on her shirt and lifted it up to reveal the long cut in her side. Immediately, the little girl ran up to the anesthetic jar on the counter where they kept her medical supplies, then rushed back and began stroking her hands over the injury in a delicate movement. Anne sighed as the pain in her side subsided. Eyes fixed in concentration, Lynn continued to run her hand over the injury as a small bit of ointment over the wound slowly soothed the pain out over the little girl's careful administration. Thank you, sweetie, Anne kissed her air-shaper daughter before ruffling her fire-shaper twin's hair. I need to use the bathroom real quick. Go get the pie shoe board out so we can play a game after I get finished. Lynn ran off and grabbed it while Azure hung on to her. Did you get really hurt out there, Mommy? She asked, looking up at her with those beautiful golden fire-shaper eyes. Are you going to be okay? It's just part of the job. Anne swallowed and stumbled to the bathroom where she kept the needle and thread. At least at my other job, there isn't a whole likelihood of injury. You need any help? Azure asked. Anne shook her head and took a soothing breath. No, I just don't want you to see me while I'm patching myself up. Swallowing, Azure nodded weakly and ran off to find the ice shoe pieces with her sister. Holding her aching side, Anne stumbled into the bathroom, then picked up the needle and started threading it through with her slightly shaking hands. Gritting her teeth, Anne leaned against the sink for support and pulled out her shirt, then started stitching up the injury. The immediate pain caused her to moan and stiffen, but she set her teeth and kept at stitching up the injury. Over and over, she interlaced the stitches, each insert of the needle sending a jolt of pain up her side. It took everything she had not to make any noise while fending off the pain. She scrunched her face up, holding it all in until finally the excruciating ordeal ended with her snapping off the end of the string and then poking the injury to make sure it set right. Breath coming in fits and starts, Anne picked up a rock, then superheated and pressed it to her injury. More pain. Tears flowing down her face, Anne nearly crushed the rock before she grabbed onto a brush and gripped that instead. Finally, she finished properly cauterizing the wound, then started working on the deeper cut on her arm. The searing pain of the red-hot rock burning her injury caused Anne to whimper. It hurts so bad. Finally, it ended. Phew, she whispered, sweat pouring off her as she looked down into her reflection's eyes. She wiped her forehead, then looked down at the moisture on her quivering hands. I need to stop, she whispered. I need to find another job. Groaning, she slumped against the sink, running her hands out through her short hair. I can't keep doing this, she muttered, her whole body tensed up to the after effects of the improvised surgery. I'm going to collapse and die if I keep doing this. Sighing in relief, Anne pushed herself to her feet and looked down at herself. Her body was tight, not even an ounce of fat. Years of fighting in underground cage matches had burned away any trace of softness from her frame. There had been other tolls, though. Scars crisscrossed over her arms, chest, and back. The worst one being a foot-long scar across her back where another metal shaper had slashed her across her back with a thrown steel knife. She traced the scar across her stomach from her pregnancy surgery. Of her scars, that was the only one she felt proud of. Breathing slowly to settle her nerves, she pushed herself off the sink and exited the bathroom. All smiles, Azure and Lynn presented her with a cake smothered in frosting and decorated with flowers and 26 candles. Happy birthday, Mommy! They yelled, proffering the cake toward her, and put out her hand to her mouth in shock. What? She whispered, running her hand along the frosting on the side. She put it to her mouth and moaned at the delicious taste. Where did you get this? We saved up money for your birthday, Mommy, Azure grinned, revealing a gap in the back of her teeth. When did that happen? We also might have stolen it, Lynn piped up, grinning up just as widely. Azure lightly smacked her sister on the arm. We weren't supposed to tell her that. Mommy always told us to be honest, even when we did something bad, Lynn grumbled as she rubbed her arm. Oh, really? Anne took the cake and put it on the table. She then folded her arms and looked down at the girls with a mock stern expression. Despite herself, however, she couldn't help a small smile. Lynn looked down at the ground, stroking the ground with her little foot while her sister looked completely unabashed at what she had done. Anne looked at them for a moment. Then when she couldn't keep a straight face, she rushed forward and set them up in a big hug. You brilliant little girls, she spun around, hugging them close and smothering them in kisses. Thank you, she whispered as she set them down. Did anybody see you? Nope, Azure remarked, putting her arms around Anne's neck and kissing her on the cheek. We never get caught. Thank goodness, Anne remarked, putting her arm. Anne ruffled Lynn's hair and kissed her forehead. Come on, let's eat that cake, shall we? Lynn squeed and rushed over to the cabinet and was about to grab a knife and some forks before Anne stopped her by tugging on her metal belt. You know, she remarked, it's my birthday, so I think we should just not bother with silverware. Why not just eat it with our hands? More squeeing, this time more high-pitched. They all dug into the cake, each taking a handful of the wonderfully gooey, chocolatey mess, then cramming it into their faces without any sense of table manners. Finally, after it had been devoured, Anne picked up her girls and let them cuddle up against her in the lone bed in their apartment. Anne gently kissed Azure on top of her head, then rubbed Lynn's back before leaning backward on the bed, and flicked on the television with a lazy motion, instantly displaying the colored moving picture, or movers as they were called. They flicked through the channels for a bit until they found one that they liked, and didn't even try to fight off sleep. She was so tired. She closed her eyes and drifted off. And that's the end.
We might have stole it.
Yes.
I'm
The
not gonna.
description of the cake made me hungry.
I'm not gonna lie. I was kind of hoping it would be Korra finally. The story with Korra being placed on trial for all the bullshit, but I like this too.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
Even better,
So-
she did.
Yeah.
So the story ends with them when they get ill from all the sugar. Am I right?
Yes.
That's the tragic conclusion of the story.
Maybe.
I want to make
Maybe.
this chocolate
We'll
cake
see.
now. Damn it!
Becca wants to
Yeah.
make chocolate cake now. You
Yeah.
ruined Becca's
Yeah.
diet, Don. Congratulations.
Oh,
diet
Becca's not
is
the only one who
ruined.
wants chocolate cake. I want chocolate cupcakes. Because with cupcakes, it's easier to control myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Thoughts.
I liked the description. I liked the imagery. That was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I was hoping for a war tribunal, but I guess I could just pretend that's what I got.
It was
Well,
good.
it sounds like this comes way after Korra, so you can always imagine that she got the tribunal that she so deserved.
Oh yeah.
So the
I
lady.
was. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just saying that the lady's not setting a very good example of her daughters in terms of table etiquette either.
I will admit you did subvert my expectations with that, like being a cop and it's like, oh, we stole this fucking cake. Oh, all right, let's eat.
Yeah, but it was well done.
Daughters
it's,
always
no,
trying to say
yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So is it supposed to be set in the same world as Avatar, or?
I was thinking that it would be, and now I'm just like, I want to get paid for this, so I'm gonna change engine
So
up
change-
so I don't get.
Change names and yeah, okay. Well then but everything I was about to say is mute then. So
Yeah. You can still say it. Like this was
Well-
originally an Avatar fan fiction, and then I decided I wanna like see if I can make something out of this.
no, then everything I was gonna say is mute because I was just gonna say the names are a bit too same.
Yeah.
We got Korra and Aang and stuff. So
Yeah.
but,
I changed it to, rather than CORRA, to the regular CORA. Like, it is a common enough name. Any other thoughts? Like, I really wanted to kind of sell the fact that she's broke and she hurts a lot.
Oh, you did.
Yes.
I could feel her pain. And having to stitch herself up, I was wincing the entire time.
Yeah, that was clear enough. Yeah, they live in the bottom. Don't even have any windows.
Gotta tell you, I can't relate.
But they should have named her. They should name the lady Plectrude, though. That's my suggestion.
Not on a diet, how dare you?
And Johan's going to make chocolate cake tomorrow. Hopefully not in a pan, though.
Alrighty. Well, Smug Boy's doing Maggie May Fish and Breaking Bad, so
Oh, God.
well,
have fun.
Well, yep. Well, we'll call that good for today. Thank you all for coming. Glad you guys enjoyed it. So the I'm gonna keep the poll as it is, and I'll just do that for the next few weeks, and then I'll just do a new poll to see how
Okay.
that goes. Anyway, we will see you guys later.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.